want to be a small car making nation, but things have changed 20 years on, and
Absolutely.
the thing is, do people want small cars anymore? I mean, historically, the Maruti 800, the car that really defined everything automotive in India. That small little hatchback kind of became the template of what a car should be in India for decades. You have every body style which fits that sub 4 meter rule, which is actually meant for hatchback.
Why saving the sub 4 meter is important, because within the sub 4 meter, or at least within a small car footprint, you can have innovation. And we've seen it, like you said, the Triber, remarkable space engineering.
It's very clear that, we've got to cut our CO2 as much as possible. So I think even from an EV point of view, a smaller EV, which does the job, I think makes a far more sense. So if it had 4 doors, if it had slightly better dynamics, I think that car is actually the perfect urban solution.
Need to improve the roads within the city, because yes, our highway network is really fantastic. You and I love that. But I think within right now, Bombay, both of us probably drove here and half of Bombay is dug up.
I think a lot of OEMs have exited the market because they've not been able to hack the sub 4 meter space where you get a huge tax benefit. In today's world, frankly, more than ever, we need to save it. Thanks for tuning in this Saturday for your weekly dose of Deep Drive, our podcast powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. Now, on this episode, we have an interesting topic. It's on cars that have really defined the Indian auto industry and market, small cars. We are a small car nation, but the small car is under threat. And what we are going to be talking about is how do we save the small car. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
And I'm Sergius Barretto. And yeah, Hormazd, absolutely. The small car, first of all, should we even save it? Right?
That's what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
I think definitely we should.
Certainly, I think we agree on that. And, and if you look at the small car, it's actually been saved. It's had interventions before, right? One major one in the 06-07 budget, I think.
2006, I think Jadhav, the finance minister, then gave a landmark policy decision where for the first time, cars were kind of categorized as small and big. Sub 4 meter rule, we came in, it's been around since, and we've had this distinction in taxation, which is quite big.
Exactly.
And with all the cess and all, it really adds up. So that really, I think, kind of established that we want to be a small car making nation, but things have changed 20 years on, and
absolutely.
The thing is, do people want small cars anymore?
2018, 2019 onward, we've been seeing a decline in small cars again. So
that's right. Yeah.
So that's why we are discussing this today.
I mean, historically, the Maruti 800, the car that really defined everything automotive in India. We've talked about it a lot of times on various podcasts, so not going to dwell on that. But that small little hatchback kind of became the template of what a car should be in India for decades, right? And I think just because it had no competition, small cars or hatchbacks had maximum market share, almost 100% market share at some point, or let's say 80-90% market share. We had Omnis as well. But the point is that, as aspiration grew, as competition grew, we had this kind of, the sedans started growing then, and then I think, right down to 2005, 6, it's actually a decline in hatchbacks, 7. And then you had let's say the sub 4 meter rule, which again stimulated it. But then again, there was a decline in hatchbacks, and then you had product innovation, which is, and that's what it is today. You have every body style which fits that sub 4 meter rule, which is actually meant for hatchbacks. Right. But with clever engineering and innovation, I think they've been very innovative. Tata Motors kicked it off with the Indigo CS, as we know. Yeah. And since then, every body style, and now SUVs are sub 4 meter. We've even had an MPV sub 4 meter in the form of the Triber. So hatchbacks, SUVs, MPVs, sedans, all sub 4 meter, and that has really formed a core category. But again, Sergius, that's under threat for multiple reasons, which we can
go into. Hormazd, in fact, and that's one of the reasons for me why saving the sub 4 meter is important, because within the sub 4 meter, or at least within a small car footprint, you can have innovation. And we've seen it, like you said, the Triber, remarkable space engineering. The third row too is decent. I mean, it is a genuine third row, let's say,
Yeah.
I think when we were all driving once, we posted that picture up also.
All seven of
All
us.
7 of us in that driver. And I think it was Shapur who remarked saying that the only one uncomfortable here is actually the driver, because of the little 800cc engine being taxed a lot. But even the third row people were pretty
that's
comfy.
right. Yeah, but to answer the thing, why we should save the small car, I think, in today's world, frankly, more than ever, we need to save it because it's very clear that, we've got to cut our CO2 as much as possible. And I think the small car is the best way to do that. It's very efficient, whether to produce, whether to run. Even if you look at an EV from a small car standpoint. So I think, I think more than ever, it needs to be done. And I think there are three things about a car which are really a big problem, or the three bogies of cars, and the enemies. One, of course, is pollution. That's been tackled with very stringent norms. We are right up to global standards, BS 6.2. And then there's safety. Cars also kill a lot of people. In India, a lot of road deaths, not only cars, but proportion of cars. So again, safety has been taken care of with increasing safety standards. And, coming back to regulation, cars pollute. So as I said earlier, emissions has been taken care of. But I think the one thing which cars are doing more and more right now is congestion. They just take up too much road space. Yeah. And I think that can only be met by making cars smaller, reducing their footprint as much as possible. So I think just the benefits of a small car are there on all fronts. And, these three real bad things about cars, which, everyone loves to knock, which is pollution, safety, and congestion. Now, safety with small cars, there's a bit of a conflict over there because we know that, all things being equal, a bigger, heavier car is safer than a smaller, lighter car. But there's enough that can be done. So that's one kind of balance over there. But small cars are always more efficient, and small cars take up a lot less road space. And I think that is absolutely, critical going forward, where our rates of motorization are growing. Don't forget, we are still around just 24, 25 cars per 1,000 people, right? And, and we're still, facing a lot of, exactly, it can go up. And I remember going to China, some years back, or whenever we go to China, even now, I've not been for a while, their Maruti 800 equivalent is a sedan. Their best-selling cars are these kind of mid-sized sedans. And however big the roads are, the traffic jams are just crazy. Now imagine having that over here, how much road space it would take up. One can argue that it's not the length, it's the width that is an issue, especially when you come to parking and things like that. But honestly, it is the length, because just do a rough calculation of you knock off a couple of centimeters of each car in traffic, and how much you could reduce the tailback if you didn't have a long boot or a big overhang from an SUV or an MPV.
Correct. Absolutely. Hormazd, in fact, and just to add to what you were saying, the other thing with small cars is they use up less resource in terms of energy to make it, paint to paint them, metal to build them. So I think they're also very resource friendly in that sense. A smaller point, but worth looking at in today's times.
I think more so when you come to EVs, because EVs are, they say EVs are clean to run, but dirty to manufacture because of the intense, if you go through the whole supply chain, from the mining, from the processing, all that, the number of chips they take, again, that's also very, energy intensive. So I think even from an EV point of view, a smaller EV, which does the job, I think makes a far more sense. And, coming to the Comet, for example, the more we drive it, the more I really like that car. It's got some major flaws which have become deal breakers. One of them being a two-door. We are just not a two-door market for a mainstream commuter vehicle. Lifestyle, it works. The Thar has shown us that. But it doesn't work as a mainstream car. People don't want that inconvenience. And don't forget, a lot of people are even chauffeur-driven. They don't like to sit. It's a narrow car, with a chauffeur up front. So if it had 4 doors, if it had slightly better dynamics, I think that car is actually the perfect urban solution, because the battery is small enough to be even charged by a 15 ampere socket. And I think that's what you're charging it on. You don't even need the home fast charger. And that is the biggest kind of hurdle to let's say charging and even adoption. Now, if you had just a 15 amp plug, which a lot of people will have far more access to that than to be able to put, let's say, a home, a wall box charger. I think, even their adoption rates would go up. Just like how scooters, they're going up because they're so easy to charge. So there's so much going for even small EVs, which makes so much sense to package them in a small footprint.
Absolutely. So, Hormazd, let's just dive straight into it then, saving the small car. Some of the top ideas, since we are on EVs, I think we can both agree that EVs is definitely, or electric propulsion is one way to save the small car, right?
I think so, because I think as we get more towards electrification, I think, obviously now the EVs are all at the top end. But I think, let's say as the supply chain develops, as, let's say parts get localized more and more, the motors, the batteries, the cells, that sort of thing, the small car will be a lot more, let's say EVs will make more sense as small cars as well. They're just used for intercity commutes. When charging infra gets better, then you won't need large batteries because you'll be able to charge more frequently, or you'll be able to charge at home more easily. So I think, even a 20, 25 kilowatt hour battery pack, which is quite small, is again, doesn't take too much resource in terms of, the raw materials, makes a lot of sense. And, these cars, getting more and more efficient could be good for 200 Ks, which is good enough for a city commute. So I think, with let's say EVs getting smaller and smaller, they lend themselves more to small cars than, let's say, big ones.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Hormazd, you mentioned the Comet. I would like to mention the VinFast VF3. Also similar, very small footprint, 2 doors. I know you don't like the 2 doors, but it does look very aspirational, completely different just because of the SUV sort of styling traits, the large wheels, which I think the Comet also has this sort of perception issue, this very tiny, small, almost comical kind of wheel size, So I think if you do have aspirational small cars, things that people can look at and say, oh, wow, it's something I'd be happy to be seen in.
But that leads me to another thing. What can save the small car, frankly, is better roads. Because, everyone wants an SUV largely because that's the best way to survive Indian roads, whether it's speed breakers, potholes. And that's really the problem with the Comet. The small wheels, the ride is really choppy. It bounces all over the place. One small bump can, kind of make it rock and shake. So we need to improve roads. We are getting good road infrastructure, but, I think just the quality is just not there. Massive speed breakers, there's just no thought given to that. As it is, EVs are generally low slung because of the battery pack. So again, it pushes you again to an SUV where you have a higher clearance. So I think one thing to save the small car also is just we need to improve the roads.
And I would add, Hormazd, need to improve the roads within the city because, yes, our highway network is really fantastic. I love that. But I think within right now, Bombay, both of us probably drove here and half of Bombay is dug up, right?
Yeah.
And not paved properly, speed breakers like you said. So, yeah, I absolutely. I think our city road sort of quality would also save the small car.
Yeah. There's another challenge which I feel for small EVs is that the delta in taxation is not as high as with a bigger car. So let's say with an SUV, all EVs today are at 5%, big or small. Whereas with ICE engines, you have it going all the way up to 50% for SUVs with the higher ground clearance of 150 mm. If you take the GST plus the cess.
150 or 170, I think.
170 mm. No, I'm saying if you take the cess, 170 mm. If you take the cess, it'll, goes up to 50. I think a lot of people have dodged that. So let's say 48%. 48 to 5 is a huge delta. Vis-a-vis, let's say 28 or 29 with the cess to 5. So, that's why we've seen all the EVs becoming a lot more desirable at the high end compared to the ICE vehicles, compared to the small cars. So I think, again, looking at the taxation is something that needs to be done. I think taxation, or let's say, is one of the key factors that can either make or break the small car segment.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the taxation, Hormazd, in that case. The sub 4 meter rule that we had back in the 06 budget, right? Do you think that needs to be continued, and do we need a tweak to it if it needs to be continued? Because there's merit to debating also where a small car starts, right?
Absolutely. So I think what the sub 4 meter has done, it's very unique for India. So it's kind of been a huge barrier for a lot of OEMs. In fact, I think a lot of OEMs have exited the market because they've not been able to hack the sub 4 meter space where you get a huge tax benefit. So, from an industry standpoint, it's not been great. It's kind of created, strong, powerful, let's say, manufacturer groups. You've got the Indians, Mahindra and Tata. You've got, Suzuki and Toyota as one, and you've got the Koreans. And I think it's all because they've got benefit from this rule at some point of time. And I think, so the other global players can't bring in their global models because most of them aren't, sub 4 meter, let's say. But I still think you have to, I think it's a great rule which maybe every other market should adopt, as you have to kind of draw distinction in size. I mean, Japan's done it historically with the K car, the Keijidosha car. But I think today, as, making small cars have just huge benefits across the board.
Exactly.
But again, coming back to the point, should the sub 4 meter rule be tweaked? I think one thing that needs to go for sure is the powertrain, let's say, limitation. The CC limitation. Because 1500 cc for diesel, 1200 cc for petrol. I mean, it made sense then. But today, the way powertrains are evolving, and the logic was good. You wanted small powertrains because you wanted small cars to be efficient as well. But now with CAFE there, it's already forcing manufacturers to kind of, give, let's say, efficient engines. So today, in an age of downsizing, turbocharging, hybridization, cubic capacity is becoming less and less relevant. So I think remove the cubic capacity rule altogether. It's not making sense anymore. And just keep a size limit. Now, the size, you can argue why 4 meters, why not 3.8, why not 4.2?
Yeah.
That's something that can be debated. 4 meters is already there. It's a template. One could argue that if you go to 4.2, which is not that much bigger, you could get a lot of global models in as well, and much easier for people to have that. 3.8, great for congestion and taking up road space, but to be honest, it would benefit just one manufacturer, which is Maruti. And hats off to them for really, actually, Maruti has saved the small car because everyone has almost exited that segment. So you have to hand it to them. And frankly, only Maruti can do that because of their cost efficiency, of their scale, of their localization, their supplier network. Only they can do it. So yeah, I think, I think the sub 4 meter rule, it has to be tweaked a bit to save the small car, and maybe we need to redefine what the small car is.
So yeah, Hormazd, I mean, that's an interesting idea, 4.2 meters, and then of course getting rid of the engine capacity. But you could also then argue that, well, you're inviting technically bigger cars, more powerful cars, faster cars, hot hatches, faster sedans. Would that, would that happen then?
I think those will still be very niche.
Okay.
I think we've seen that these are not segments that are going to be mass segments. And what's going to happen is that there will still be a push towards efficiency, lower
CAFE,
because of CAFE, and lower CO2. And frankly, there are technologies which allow you to get the best of both worlds. Maybe a hybrid at some point. Why not? See, at the end of the day, if your CO2 is low, I think that's what counts. And so that's where I think cubic capacity and even technology, what to dictate, becomes a bit irrelevant. So I think the only debate really is if you go to 4.2, is it no longer a small car just to accommodate, let's say more
other players,
global players in that. But, I think that's something which is debatable. But that something can be done. But whatever it is, there still needs to be a distinction in terms of dimension, because I think that really is, takes care of that one bogey of the car, which is congestion. As I said, safety, the other two emissions are taken care of.
Right, absolutely. And Hormazd, in fact, to further your idea, perhaps you could have two small car definitions, a 3.8 and a 4.2. Bring in.
I think that would get too complicated. Too complicated, exactly. But what I see happening is, which is not there, is EVs, everything at 5%.
Yeah,
today-
whether it's a 5 meter
or it's a BMW i7 which we are driving right now, or the EQS, 1.5 crore plus cars getting a lower GST than maybe even a motorbike, ICE bike. So clearly over there the optics are going to kind of, at some point, people are going to question that, should there be a differentiation for EVs? I think right now the optics are focusing on, we want 5% because all about CO2 reduction, all about going green. The green plate gives you a real benefit. I think honestly the government's done a good job. But I think as EV penetration grows, the government at some point will realize that, they're losing too much on GST and they might have a slab even on EVs. So hypothetically, you could continue with EVs below 4 meters or 4.2 meters, whatever the new definition is, at 5%, and anything above that, maybe at 10%. Have a small delta over there, which again will drive people to produce small compact EVs, which I think that really is the ideal urban solution, is a small compact EV. Because I think that's really the need of the hour.
Absolutely. And almost the other thing which I want to talk about now, some very interesting data here, is the other thing to save the small car is costs. Costs have been going up, right?
Absolutely. Material costs have gone through the roof.
Safety and regulations, emissions, everything has sort of pushed the...
it's like the perfect storm against a small car. Everything has sort of come together.
Exactly.
And also don't forget the aspirational requirements where beyond regulation, customers are demanding features in small cars.
Exactly.
Infotainment, connectivity, touch screen, all that sort of thing.
Exactly.
So that's also putting a lot of pressure on the small car. And I think we've seen prices go up a lot. I think, the Alto, for example.
True. The Alto, exactly. It was the cheapest car in 2019. I've taken 2019 because this was the year before we had the big cull where all, the cars which were not meeting the safety and emission norms. So before that, 2.94 lakh was the Alto. Today's Alto, a different Alto, of course. But today's Alto is 4.10 lakh.
It just goes to show how much pressure, because that really is the barometer of the small car, how it's shaping up, or the health of it, in terms of cost. So clearly, I think, as you rightly said, cost escalation has been a huge factor that has really
needs to be addressed.
It needs to be addressed. How you address it, there are, I think, multiple ways to do it. But I think at the end of the day, it can either be done through government relooking at taxation in terms of ways to promote the small car, because I think, everyone's now, after COVID, people have become a lot more aspiration. They want big cars. They want the thing, which is great. Everyone has aspiration, but honestly, that's coming at a cost to society. And for me, the biggest cost is really, coming at congestion. I personally, I just love small cars.
Right.
Whatever maybe I'm short or whatever, I fit into them easily. I would always prefer, even at the high end, a Macan to a Cayenne,
right.
If I were to buy one. And even a Cayman, which is so much smaller than a 911, it just makes so much more sense. I just think, we need to look at small being beautiful. And I think, obviously, I think government also needs to kind of push that more and more.
The cost. And there's one sort of controversial, and I know we're going to get a lot of comments once we discuss this, which I want to talk about, because almost a personal thing, is we've pushed emissions. Obviously, we need to do that because cars do pollute. We've pushed safety, yes, to a point. But I think at some point we got to be also realistic. Like, there was a lot of talk of 6 airbags mandatory. That would have made the small car even more expensive. And you got to look, you look at the prices, 2.94, 4.10. You're keeping people and families on two-wheelers for longer now, right? It's not therefore keeping those families safer.
Well, to be honest, it's been Mr. Bhargav's argument for a long time, and there is merit in that. But of course, safety is such an emotional topic. It's...
Yeah, but I think we've gotten there, Hormazd. We've gotten there now. We've got safe cars.
Honestly, I have a view also looking at how three-wheelers account for a very small auto rickshaws account for a very small proportion of road deaths. There is a direct correlation between a less powerful car, in a way, being sometimes less prone to having an accident than a more powerful or a very fast car. So, it's all to do with, let's say the environment in which the vehicle is operating in, that sort of thing. But as I said, it's a very emotional subject. It's one of those things which, how do I say, everyone has a view on, everyone wants to show how morally right they are. So if someone said we should have 12 airbags in small cars, everyone says, yes, we should have 12 airbags, at any cost. So that can go on. But you're right. I don't think it's going to happen. I think what can be done is maybe, to look at taxation on certain safety components which go in. Can that be done cheaper, as a way to, let's say, reduce the cost of safety? Or, reward cars which are safer with a lower tax. That's never been done, In fact, we only penalize, whether it's emissions or safety, But I think, that could be one way of looking at it, quite complicated. But I think what could save the small car, and I think we'll have to wait, is a bit of stability in regulations and a stability of costs, which hopefully are now coming in. We were very volatile with supply chain issues, supply demand being completely gone, production after COVID, the whole world was a mess. Container shortages, we were in a shortage economy, right? Frankly. Now we're just coming out of that again. We've seen that demand is kind of weakening out. It's getting back to normal. I think there's going to be a stability of regulations. I think in terms of safety and emissions, I don't see any big changes happening for the next couple of years. As I said, raw material prices also should be stable. Then what will happen is the affordability level will go up. And I think with that, relatively, small cars will become a lot more affordable. Because don't forget that the prices of small cars shot up far higher than people's income levels. Yeah. And that delta was too high. But I think as income levels grow, GDP grows, it's not been great right now, but I think with GDP growing, per capita income growing, we are a growing economy. We just need to grow.
So it should catch up.
I think it should catch up. And, by end 26, 27, you could see small car coming back. I mean, if you look at the curve, small car has gone up, down. So, you can't give up on it. It's sort of fought back, because I think somewhere down there in let's say, the mass public, where, personal mobility is still seen as a privilege. It should be a right. The small car really fits that bill. Even the ubiquitous hatch does fit that bill better than anything else. Yeah.
That's true, and I think also the other idea we can talk about in terms of saving the small car, and this is going to sound really funny, is the SUV. But the Tata Punch, for example, it's a micro SUV. Yeah. I think the SUV body style. Let's be very clear before we get bombarded for no 4-wheel drive. Yeah. But the SUV body style can actually save the small car.
Yeah, that's right.
It will bring aspiration back in there. People could look at it again and say, hey, yeah, I could buy this. The VinFast VF3, I really like that car. So, and I think the Punch, if you look at it, it's actually taking away WagonR buyers. Technically, it's sort of taking away WagonR, Exter. Now, Exter also, yes, is a sort of micro SUV maybe, but for some reason, I think the Punch just worked.
It is, but again, the micro SUVs, absolutely, they are the new small car in a way, and they are growing. But again, they have larger wheels, they are heavier, so I think, the question is, what about the, let's say the good old hatchback? Can that come back? And as I said, I think with EVs, there's a lot of scope for that to come back over there, because EVs have to be small, light. It just makes them a lot more efficient. But I think you're right. I think what's happened also is that the market has made everyone pivot to small SUVs over small cars, and which are small cars in a way. And we're going to see more and more of that. I think Maruti themselves are going to be launching, more, let's say, more compact micro SUVs. So we will see that happening. And I think that will, really, I think, stimulate that end. But I think, what can be done to save it, I think, honestly, mainly is the taxation. And don't forget, the biggest threat right now to the small car, which you've not talked about, is the pre-owned or used car.
Used car market, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that's, I think, used cars, you're getting, younger used cars in the market for great prices, and they're becoming a big threat to the small car. Nothing you can do about that. I think used cars, as you know, they get more organized, you know, with big brands like Spinny, getting into this segment, they are becoming more and more attractive and seen as good options for a new car. And they take care of that aspiration desire. You know, someone would maybe rather buy a slightly used Swift over a new Alto. So, you know, clearly that it takes care of that. And I think data shows that the average used car now in the market is about 7.3 years, which had gone up to 9 during COVID. So I think, as I said, and regulations in certain states, this whole 10-year rule and 15-year rule, 10-year rule for diesel and 15-year rule for petrol makes people want to sell their cars off much sooner. So they enter the used car market as newer cars in certain states where the rule doesn't apply. So I think the biggest threat right now to the small car is the used car market.
Correct. But as you said, there's nothing much you can do about it, because technically also if we look at other markets as well, the entry segment is actually the used segment. Student cars and things like that. It's pretty much the used car that everyone goes. So yeah, I don't think we can do much about that. But Hormazd, there's another thing that we could look at. If you look at Europe, there's a new trend or other. Well, we are noticing it at least, is the quadricycle. You know, the small little Citroen Ami, for example, the small little cars. Do you think that is something that Indians would look at? Because we've never been kind to quadricycles and small little cars, right? Even
I don't think they would. I think there are two things. Quadricycles make a lot of sense from a sustainability point of view. They really do. But I think two things would work against it. One is the aspiration. They would be seen as, too kind of, to be honest, down market.
Right.
However cute you make them. Maybe, electrification can change things and make people think differently.
Right.
Without the old stigmas, which there are. But I mean, look at the Nano, for example. That didn't work. And actually, the Nano started life as a quadricycle in concept. But there's so much pressure on giving it the same safety standards as, let's say...
as a regular car.
Yeah. As a regular car. As, let's say, whatever, a Tata Harrier.
Right.
The same standards. In that sense, the cost just goes up. And then to fight for a lower safety standard for a quadricycle, I think that's gone. It's just not going to happen, right or wrong. So I think the quadricycle in India, doesn't have a chance at all. And it never did, really. So I think we got to play to our strengths, which is really be innovative in cutting costs as much as we can, have the scale effect. Sadly, we don't have huge export markets. The whole idea of the excise rule when it came in was to make India the world's hub for small cars, global production hub for small cars. And we did have small cars going. Maruti also exports a lot. But, you even had, let's say, Nissan exporting at that time, the smaller cars, the Micra, all that happening. But exports have just wound up. I think small cars globally also are under threat. They have been. And again, for the same reasons. Emissions, safety, aspiration, same reasons as over here. So, and to start with, the small cars weren't that small to begin with. So our small cars really have no place in other parts of the world, fundamentally in India. But I think, honestly, India has shown the way that, it's small cars really do make a lot of sense. I wish other countries would adopt that thinking, because cars are just taking up too much road space as more and more cars hit the road. We're cranking out 4.1 million cars every year. Infrastructure is not keeping up. That's why, I'm a firm believer that, it can solve a lot of problems by just keeping your footprint as compact as possible.
No, absolutely, Hormazd. And in fact, we must clarify also to our viewers that, yes, you have to save the small car. There is also public transport that you can argue that that's where people should be at. And yes, I mean, of course, we've seen public transport, metros being developed and things like that. But people are not going to not have a small car, like you said.
Look, see, this public transport argument is there, but if it was that good, people would automatically go to it.
No, and you could have both. I mean, Hormazd, like me, right? I mean, I drive, I have a car, I have the office car, but I also have M-Indicator, my app, and my UTS app, and I travel by train a lot as well.
Yeah.
Right? So, you will have both. Even if you are a train commuter, like me, you are also going to be a car commuter and a car owner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Public transport, that's a topic for a different podcast altogether. It's always been behind, but I think right now it's a fascinating time for the auto industry, because I think this whole CO2 cafe let's say issue is just becoming bigger and bigger. A lot of people are offsetting that with EVs, but again looking at it holistically, just the smaller you are, the less you consume.
Yeah, absolutely, Hormazd. So, we've had a couple of ideas, right, from taxations to body size, like SUVs.
And tweaking the sub 4 meter.
Yeah, absolutely. Tweaking the sub 4 meter rule, SUVs coming in, electrification, a lot of ideas to save the small car. But do you think manufacturers will come into this segment? Because many have exited.
Exactly. And, I think, as I said earlier, the sub 4 meter rule has caused a lot of people to not only not be there in that segment, but even exit the market. I mean, Ford tried it, they failed, they're out. GM also tried it at some point, they're out. Company like Stellantis was smart. They didn't really go into it whole hog. I remember Carlos Tavares saying it's a big red ocean. I mean, it's a big mark segment, but you bleed. Yeah. So very, very difficult to get into, and clearly it's because just the way our market is structured, the way it is, we're a high volume, low margin market, and that's what the bottom end of the market is. So the stakes are very, very high. To start off, you have to have a very high level of localization. For that, you need to have very, very high level of production and scale. Is the market there for that? No one's willing to take that risk, because even the margins there are very small. And everyone who's tried it has failed. To take on Maruti on its own turf is something you just don't do. But I think a tweaking of the regulations, maybe if 4 meters becomes 4.2 meters, that could be one way of looking at it. I think the engines, let's say the powertrain or the cubic capacity is just removed altogether. It would just make it a lot easier for other people to get into a segment or get into a smaller cars, which I really think is something that's been ignored, and which is really what this market, needs more of. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this episode of Deep Drive interesting. Don't forget to tune in every Saturday at 11 a.m. for future episodes. Thanks for tuning in.